Here's the thing about Anthrax that separates them from every other band in the Big Four. Slayer scared your parents. Megadeth impressed your guitar teacher. Metallica made your older brother feel like a philosopher. But Anthrax made you want to throw on a pair of Bermuda shorts, grab a skateboard, and absolutely lose your mind in a mosh pit. And somehow that was just as metal as all of it. And nothing captures that identity better than what they did in late 1987 when they were riding the wave of one of the greatest thrash albums ever recorded, Among the Living, a record that has cemented them as legitimate heavy hitters in the most competitive scene in music. Most bands in that position would have played it safe, put their heads down, started quietly writing the follow-up, protected their credibility at all costs. Anthrax went in the studio in the Bahamas and recorded a hip-hop parody song instead. This is where the story gets genuinely funny because the I'm the Man EP was never supposed to be anything. It wasn't a calculated career move. Nobody sat in a boardroom and greenlit a rap metal crossover strategy. This thing was born out of leftover studio time, a movie quote that wouldn't leave Frank Bello's brain, and a record label in Europe that needed something to sell. Here's the setup. Anthrax had been in the Bahamas, Compass Point Studios in Nassau to be specific, tracking Among the Living with legendary producer Eddie Kramer, the man who had engineered records for Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin. They finished ahead of schedule, the studio time was paid for, so rather than pack up and fly home, they decided to mess around. They had been obsessed with the Beastie Boys' License to Ill, the bratty energy of it, the chaos of it, the absolute refusal to take itself seriously. Scott Ian and the guys have been bouncing rap rhymes off each other backstage and in hotel rooms for months. Frank Bello, meanwhile, had become borderline pathologically obsessed with a specific line from a 1983 Rodney Dangerfield comedy called Easy Money, in which a character named Julio, played by Taylor Negron, delivers this completely throwaway line. I'm the man, I'm so bad I should be in detention.
I'm so bad, I should be in detention.
Bello repeated this constantly.
I'm so bad, I should be in detention. I'm the man!
He repeated that line so much, his bandmates almost wanted to throw him out the window. So they channeled it. They wrote a goofy rap track, and they wanted the actual Beastie Boys to appear on it. They reached out, they couldn't get hold of them, so they figured they'd just do it themselves. Scott Ian and Dan Spitz, both Jewish, convinced the rest of the band to open a track with a heavily distorted, down-picked metal version of the traditional Jewish folk melody, Hava Nagila, just to underline a joke, just to make absolutely sure nobody thought this was serious. They called it I'm the Man, they laughed their way through the recording, and then they essentially forgot about it. But Island Records in Europe needed something, a maxi single, a B-side, something to keep the momentum going overseas. Anthrax handed them the joke track, it shipped, import copies started filtering back into the United States, and then rock and metal radio stations started playing it, and fans started calling in, asking to hear it again. John Zazula at Megaforce Records in the US looked at what was happening and said, essentially, we need to put this out right now. The problem was that one goofy track does not an EP make, so they got creative about packaging it. The EP runs about 28 minutes and it splits cleanly into two halves, studio experiments and live recordings. The studio tracks got recorded right there at Compass Point during the Among the Living sessions. Charlie Bellante laid down a heavy funk-influenced drum groove, and instead of using a drum machine or a sequencer to loop it, which would have been the obvious call, they physically looped the tape. Old school, completely manual. They wanted that locked-in hip-hop feel without losing the human element underneath it. For the vocals, they divided the isolation booth entirely. Scott, Charlie, and Frank crowded around microphones together in the main room, trading bars back and forth like they were doing a multi-MC cipher, reportedly laughing so hard through the takes that Eddie Kramer just kept the tape rolling and caught whatever he could. The whole atmosphere was apparently the opposite of how a serious metal record gets made. And then there's the sampling. Because it's 1987, there's no digital software, no plugins, no Ableton session. Every sound effect, every pop culture drop, they had to be manually flown into the master mix from secondary tape machines and vinyl records during the final mix stage. The track includes a direct audio sample from the main riff from Metallica's Master of Puppets, vocal drops from Run DMC, and the Beastie Boys and Sam Kinnison's iconic Primal Scream. All of it stitched together by hand is a genuinely impressive patchwork when you think about the technical limitations they were working with. The other studio track is a cover of Black Sabbath, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, also cut from those Bahamas sessions. Rather than treat it reverently and try to match the original flow, do me swagger, Anthrax grabbed it by the collar and they ran. They sped it up, sharpened the edges, turned it into something that hits with a genuine thrash aggression, and they made it work. The back half of the EP is a live material, and it was captured on July 11, 1987 at the Arcadia Theater in Dallas, Texas during the Among the Living tour. A mobile recording truck was parked outside the venue, running direct multi-track lines from the soundboard and crowd mics. No safety net, no overdubs added later. What you hear in those tracks is exactly what happened that night in Dallas. Sweat, crowd noise, minor timing slips, and all. The live set includes Caught in the Mosh, I Am the Law, and a live version of I'm the Man, which famously featured the live role swap that had become a defining moment in their shows. Charlie Benanti and Frank Bello will put down their instruments and pick up the stage mics. Joey Belladonna, their powerhouse clean vocalist, would jump behind the drum kit, and the crowd lost their minds every single time, and the recording captures exactly why. Full package, 2 studio versions of the title track, a censored radio edit, and the fully unhinged explicit version, the Sabbath cover, then the 3 live tracks. Retail price deliberately kept low to make it an easy, cheap impulse buy for fans. And here's where it gets complicated, because in 1987, thrash metal took itself very seriously. The unspoken code of the scene was leather, denim, dark themes, and nuclear paranoia, an absolute refusal to let anything mainstream through the gate. Hip-hop and metal were not just separate, they were seen as rival subcultures, practically hostile to each other. So when one of the big 4 dropped a rap parody record, the response was split hard down the middle. The backlash was loud. A vocal section of the underground metal community called it a sellout. How would you write an album about societal decay and Judge Dredd one month and then rhyme over Hava Nagila the next? Angry letters flooded metal magazines like Hit Parader and Metal Forces. Anthrax had anticipated some of this. They actually included a self-aware note on the back cover of the vinyl pressing, essentially winking at the diehards and reassuring them it wasn't permanent insanity. But for the other half of the fan base, the younger crowd, the skate punk kids, the mosh crew who had always connected with Anthrax's sense of humor, it landed perfectly. These were bands who already knew the band wore surf shorts on stage and made comic book references in their songs. This wasn't a departure, it was just them. And then there's a third group, the ones who didn't normally buy thrash records at all, suburban rock fans, skaters, hip-hop listeners, curious about what these metal lunatics were doing. For a lot of people, the I'm the Man EP was the first Anthrax record they ever owned. It sold over 1 million copies in the US alone, a platinum certification for a metal EP that was essentially built around a joke and a Sabbath cover and a couple of live tracks from a Dallas club. What Scott Ian always assumed would be a completely forgotten inside joke ended up breaking down walls that nobody had managed to knock down before. The DNA of rap metal, nu metal, so much of what would dominate heavy music in the 1990s, you could trace a direct line back to this messy, chaotic, gloriously stupid little record. And it set Anthrax up for something even bigger. That crossover DNA didn't go dormant. It was quietly building toward one of the most significant collaborations in heavy metal history. But first, there was an album to make, and State of Euphoria is the record that divided the Anthrax fan base for nearly 40 years. I'll be talking about that one next. In the meantime, check out this playlist, The Story of Anthrax, where I cover all of the Anthrax albums and some adjacent bands like SOD. And I'll be doing this until the new one drops in September. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. See you in the next one.